the screens are getting, or the casements for the units on the dialable LEDs are just getting larger and larger because it gets so hot. They can't keep them cool.
I was under the impression the biggest problem with the organic LEDs is moisture.
I heard it was dimmable. When you start changing the Kelvin temperature inside, it's a drastic change. You can't go from 5,000 to 65. It doesn't look the same as we do on these. It's like from 20,000 or 2,000, excuse me, to 75,000. That's when you start seeing the big changes. So NEC, LaCie, and AZO have been doing research on these for about 5 years, and Tom Gaboy out of Long Beach, California, I met him a while back. He explained to me how to go to the trade shows until I didn't understand anymore. But he just said, you know, we started on these little paper thin things, and we thought they were so great, but then when you started to get color fidelity, it went out the window. So then the next stage was the same unit, but a better bulb, and it melted the chassis. So then they went to a bigger chassis and put fans in it, and then that didn't work. And there were a bigger one and a bigger one. So he said, now we're almost the same size as the old CRT picture tubes. I mean, they're just these huge, deep 22-inch cabinets to keep everything clean and airy, but the problem is they can't get something for us dialed in. I mean, for everyone else, you know, the backlight little laptops are great, but if you want to do Photoshop on them, you can't. That's the problem.
They don't use plasma at all in the desktop sizes. So.
Too heavy. What was the difference? None. Traffic. All right, here's our Adobe 98 and sRGB color space. As you can see, it lives inside, except for one little point at the top in the purple and in the yellow in the front here. It just, right there, it just comes out just a little bit. That sRGB still has more color in those two spaces, that more than Adobe 98. A, again, is Adobe, and then sitting inside of it is CMYK. So people always say, oh, the Adobe 98 file or the Pro RGB file is so important for me. I need all that color. And my question is, well, your monitor is pretty much sRGB, your camera captured it in Adobe or sRGB, and your printer is sRGB. Some proclaim that they can do Adobe 98, but where is all that imagery? I mean, if I photographed anyone in this room in 8-bit, your image would live right there. Unless you had a dark blue or purple sweater on, you might have a couple pixels out here. That's it. So if this is my sRGB and you live here in it, why do I need to shoot something this big? Just a waste of my card, isn't it? File space, hard drive space, moving those images around. Now if I'm going out and shooting the best DSLR I have, or a medium format leaf or whatever it might be, and shooting a landscape that I know I'm going to try to make a poster out of, or it's going to go to a print house, then yes, you want to capture that thing as big as possible, because you never know how it's going to be used, especially if you're being paid for it. You can always task it down to a smaller size, but you can't make a small image file go up to a big size. So yeah, you want to catch the biggest thing your camera will actually allow you to get. And then you want to work on the first file that way, or save it and then make a copy of it in a little JPEG that you can work on and print in your printer, or send to the lab, because they only want sRGB anyway. So if you send them an Adobe 98 file, they're just going to convert it and charge you 50 cents a print, or an image that you're doing it for or more, to make it an sRGB file. The B graphics just shows you just the difference between CMYK, or sRGB, sorry, and CMYK. It's even smaller yet. But it still, again, has color traits that sRGB doesn't. It has more greens and a little bit of yellow on one side.
Well, are you saying instead of a raw file, you send them in a JPEG?
No, you shoot the raw file, because you may need to work on that. You may have shot one job today, and then tomorrow when you go out and shoot, you forgot to change something. Well, the great thing about raw is you can convert it.
Right.
But you save that raw file, you're never gonna work on it, especially if you're working in Lightroom. You're just gonna pull some information off of it as a sidecar. But you're gonna make a copy, a JPEG that you can work on, so you can either print it locally or send it to your lab, or email it to somebody.
So when you say instead of an sRGB,
No, that's what you're gonna use, is an sRGB file, instead of your raw data file. You're not gonna make a TIFF anymore.
what I'm saying is that your JPEG?
Correct, that's my JPEG. It's an
not-
8-bit file.
Okay, it's not another, it's not another conversion.
No, it's not, it's the standard globally, which is great.
Okay. Well, the Adobe 98 file would be the raw?
Well, that's possibly how your camera allowed you to shoot it, or when you exported it in through Bridge, or however you got it into your system, it may have said, how do you want to save this in Photoshop, I'm sorry. Everything's Adobe. In your preferences, how do you want to convert your files? I want to convert them to Adobe 98, I want to save them in this folder, I want to make a backup over here. You set up all those tasks. Well, if you brought in your camera and it allows you to shoot Adobe 98, you're going to bring it in, you're going to save it as Adobe 98, you're going to make one JPEG, you're going to put it over in the folder on your desktop or on your hard drive, and that's when you're going to work on it. But if you shot it in sRGB, because you shot a wedding or portraits, you really don't need a huge file. You just need something you can work with, and it's recognizable from the beginning to the end. Because you're most likely not going to print those yourself. You're going to send those to a lab, because you just shot 150 of them, and they're going to go make 8x10s, 5x7s, and some wallets.
Okay, if you figure never more than an 8x10, then what size of a file are you talking?
For JPEG,
Yeah.
I shoot Fujis. I would probably be in fine small, and that's still going to give me 256 by, or 2056 by 35 or 3400.
So it's still gonna be.
No, I'd still make a 30 by 40 out of that.
It's still gonna be a pretty good file.
Yeah, probably 11, 12 megs.
Yeah.
Bigger than you need. I mean, who makes big prints here? Anyone? I stopped. I used to make, 16 by 20s, or 20 by 24s. I make 8 by 10s if I'm lucky anymore. Most of my stuff ends up here on some PowerPoint presentation that I showed everyone else.
That's part I love about digital, you don't pay for the prints.
Yeah, but no one sees them anymore, just me. I keep them all in here in folders and files, and I got hard drives full of them, and
Someone wants a print, you send it to them.
I sent them, exactly. So, where are we at here? Laptop. So, on my screen, and Apple is notorious for this, all you can change on this is brightness. I can change the color temperature, I can change my gamma, which is kind of like a contrast, and it's also a color shift mechanism, but I can't do contrast, which is the most important one. And everyone talks about contrast, 10,000 to 1 or 500 to 1. For us photographers, anything over 140 is worthless. So it's not the contrast for us, it's the dot pitch. How fast does it recycle on a regular basis? If it recycles every 7 seconds or milliseconds, it's too fast. It doesn't give us sharp edges. If it changes every 28 to 30 milliseconds, then we're going to have a real nice stable image. Plus, as you walk around it, the image doesn't change because the screen is very focused, it's very sharp, and the image is embedded almost in there. Nice. So on this image, when we get into soft proofing, if I use the wrong paper, I lose all that bright red right there, top and bottom, and I lose all the detail along this boat. So we'll bring that up and I'll show you that in a couple different exposure, different papers that we can select for that. But understanding what the papers can do is almost as important as understanding what your camera can do. Because if you say, oh, you know, you have that idea like Ansel did, I'm gonna shoot this black and white shot, but I know in exposing it I have to do this, this, and this to get the density the way I need it. And then when I go and process it, I need to do a little bit of push processing, a little bit of retarding on the development to make sure my highlights and my shadows stay within a certain area. And then when he goes and prints it, he has to use a 4 filter, a 3 filter, a 2 filter, and a 1 filter on a special paper, just to get the print the way he wants it. Same thing here. We know what our camera can do, we know what our media card, who cares about that, as long as it writes it, that's all we care about, right? We know what our Photoshop skills are gonna be doing, and then we know what is gonna happen when we go to print it, because we softproof, or we at least have printed on that paper enough, we know that, hey, my reds go a little cyan, or my yellows get flat. And you know, learn how to compensate. Well, if you have a profile for that, and you softproof it to those different profiles, you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's not a guess in your head. You're working really fast, you forget to do that one little step, or that action, and then, oh, I'm gonna reprint that one again. Yes, sir?
Would that be why a picture looks different if I use paper with different brightness just to print a sample picture to see
Yep.
what I use just plain paper?
Because what you assigned it one thing, it's gonna put down, it's called dithering, it's gonna put down so much ink, thinking that it's going on a photo paper possibly, and it's going on regular Xerox paper, and it just bleeds out.
But I had different brightnesses of paper. One was like 106 or something, the other one was 83 or something.
Correct.
When I printed the same picture with the same settings, it looked different on those two different papers.
Correct.
Okay,
the
that's
profile
what
for
you're
it.
talking about there,
Yep.
Franklin?
Every paper has a different profile, or needs a different profile. So, in softproofing, how many people are using Photoshop? No one? Okay. So up in view, up under view in the header, the first thing that comes down is customize. So you click on customize and it comes over to customizing proof. And now I can simulate where I'm going to print it to or what I'm going to print it on, right here. I always want my black point compensation on, and then the only thing that's going to change this image down here is what paper I'm selecting it to go on, how that ink's going to respond to that, and also what my rendering intent is. Am I in perceptual or am I in relative colorimetric? Those are the two most common ones used. But if it doesn't look good, you could always try the other two. There's 4 in there to pick from. When you get into bicubic and when you get into colorimetric, they get really saturated and really over the top because they're designed for colors that really aren't in nature. They're more man-made colors, more like this, or shiny metals that have a lot of tone to them, ballooning. So once you do that, the preview changes, and you can just click up on the preview, and you can just watch it change. On, off, and it's like, wow, I lost my color, I lost my detail. Change the paper, oh, I gained my detail, but I lost my saturation. Change the paper again. And as you go through, and these are profiles that you've either loaded or made yourself, and that's what it's going to happen. So when you're applying the profiles, and if in Elements it's different. I try to look, I don't have Elements, I apologize. I tried to get a download for a sample just to at least make this look like a lot of your screens. But I could not, they wouldn't give me a test run. If you have CS4, it won't work. In this box here, you're going to be able to select what profile you want to use on that image. And then you're assigning it here, you're turning your color